nuts, right? Because you don't want crazy people to be the source of what you're working on, and which is why you really need to develop good contacts. But you're trying to say something insightful outside the realm of groupthink. The fact that these markets, I was once told that weathermen make economists look good. And because of the forecasting abilities. And the truth is that you're forced to cover markets that have moving targets, that have problems with forecasts, and you've basically hitched your wagon to a horse that is running on a random walk. And this is a problem. And I want to share a couple of stories about this. In 2004, I was an outlier. I had started covering commodities. I was really bullish on oil. Oil at that time was sort of in the low to mid 30s. And I had published a report in which I forecasted an oil price of $50 by the end of the year. If I told you how many people called to laugh at me, which were some pretty big names, by the way, you would be surprised. Or maybe you wouldn't. 6 months later, they were calling me back, and then I was on speed dial for other reasons than pure humor. A couple years later, though, when Goldman wrote their report about the super spike, $105 oil, my boss comes out of his office and says, "I am so glad you did not write this shit." So, the super spike thing was right. It took a couple of years, though. But the point is that if I had written that, I don't know. I might have gotten the boot or gotten, really in some trouble for having written something so scandalous. And, here we thought at 35 I was pushing the limits with 50. If I had written that piece based on how shocked everyone was when that piece first came out, I can't stress enough what that was like and what that must be like for financial journalists too, right? We hear these reports of, I had this story, I knew this was going on, but the editor didn't want it. We didn't want to pursue the story at this time. Timing's everything, and so that's a real problem. And so as a solution, I would propose something that's very consultancy. And four kind of ways to peel back the onion. Because honestly, being a financial journalist also reminds me of what it was like to be a consultant, where you're thrown in to a company where you don't know anything about the company or you don't know anything about the industry, and you quickly have to get up to speed. This is very common. And there's a 4-step process that you should follow that I'd highly recommend. The first thing is you ask lots of questions. And the second thing is you probe on the answers. The third thing is, despite your probing, you don't believe anyone's answers. And then you test the responses with everybody else. So that's pretty much how it works. The linchpin here is not believing anyone and testing every theory. What would you need to believe in order for X, Y, and Z is probably more effective a way to kind of peel back the onion than just sort of chasing down one lead or running with one lead. And I know the journalists I talk to on an almost daily basis, they often will call me and they'll say, "What do you think about this thing?" So the last thing I want to talk about, I want to just say is that, so for future, if we look forward and we think, how could financial journalism do things better, right? Understanding the financial space, understanding how these markets work is really, really paramount. And if we look at where things are going, you see financial journalism, financial journalists morphing into analysts, and I see this across sectors. The contacts I've had, especially at OPEC and elsewhere, you see these sort of hybrid roles where you move from being, a journalist on a rotation of beats to being in a financial beat to really getting up the learning curve and then oftentimes making a jump in the financial sector. But regardless of whether you make a transition into finance or or you advance your own career, there's really there's really a need for more education and more support. And I know we talked yesterday about different things, including how to subsidize journalism and things like this. That's not something I would say is necessary. But what I would say is necessary is support from management to educate, especially their financial journalists in the space. And I want to tell one quick last story. I am getting the hook, but I will tell one quick last story. So I want you to imagine for a second a graph. And, if we think the x-axis is knowledge and the y-axis is a return, right? So if we say the stock market gets a return of 8%, right? That's the average. But if we think about the knowledge component, someone's getting above 8%, right? Well, they're going to be above the line. So if people with lots of knowledge are above the line, that's the average. What does the line look like? Well, the actual data point probably looks like this, right? Where you have people with a little knowledge are below the line. That's what I refer to as the monkey line, because if you had a monkey at a computer terminal just pushing buttons, they'd make 8%. But people who have a little knowledge somehow do worse, whereas people with a lot of knowledge do better. And that's really the goal, is to get up to that higher knowledge area. And I thank you all very much. And I believe, according to Ethna, we're going to have a series of Q&A with the next two speakers. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Wonderful. Thank you so much. You can hold on. Well, we'll give it to our next speaker, perhaps.